We've talked a lot about how eating disorders and restriction can impact the body and metabolism, but something we haven't talked about a lot is how it can actually impact the brain. And I think that's important for us to understand and go over because anorexia and restriction really is a disorder of the brain, and it can impact the brain in a lot of ways that some people don't even realize. So what I want to talk about today is 3 different things. So first and foremost is it decreases the body's amount of serotonin. And so serotonin is, of course, that happy neurotransmitter. Now, when someone is under eating, that decreases their body's availability of carbohydrates and protein for that matter. You need both of those to make serotonin. So the under eating results in not enough carbs and protein to make enough serotonin, so those serotonin levels are low. And what we see is actually an increase in depression, obsessive thoughts, anxiety, and gastroparesis, which I'll digress for just a second. Gastroparesis means slow gut movement. And I've mentioned this before, but remember what that can mean is they're actually going to experience a lot of constipation and bloating, but that's from under eating. It's not from eating too much, like that might get distorted. So anyways, decrease in serotonin is what can happen. The other thing, and some of the research that they've done, this is interesting for you to know, is that when someone has anorexia, they actually have done some research that basically shows that their reward signals in their brain are not the same as someone without anorexia. And so what happens is typically when someone eats a food, it triggers a reward response in the brain, and they're kind of happy that they ate that food, and it, actually increases that serotonin level. But individuals with anorexia don't have that same reward pathway. They're doing a lot of research into this, and actually what they're finding is that individuals with anorexia don't experience the same reward pathways. So what's happening is they'll eat, but they don't get that same kind of serotonin boost or that, happy feeling from eating the food, which makes it, in essence, easier for them to restrict their intake. Now, the third thing is that actual restriction and malnourishment and not taking in enough food decreases the gray matter in the brain. And so in the research they've done in that, they've seen that individuals with anorexia have the lowest amount of gray matter. And then people who are recovered but had anorexia were kind of in the middle. And then people who had never had anorexia had the highest. The positive news about that, though, is by maintaining a higher weight or a more regular or normal weight for your body and eating more food, you can restore that gray matter, but under eating is going to decrease all of that. Now, I wanted to point out those 3 things because a lot of times people ask me or tell me that they're seeing someone in their life that is dealing with restriction or disordered eating, and they feel like they're a totally different person. What they're experiencing is that their mood is changing, they're really rigid, they're hostile, they freak out over little things that they might not have freaked out about before. And especially for the parents who have children who have eating disorders, sometimes they tell me that they feel like it's a completely different child, that, they're angry, they're withdrawn, all of these things. And that's because of some of those changes that are happening in the brain from anorexia and restriction. Now, that's important to note because when you're trying to help this person, one thing that we talk about in the eating disorder community a lot is exactly that, the eating disorder brain, right? And it's quite literally this kind of other part that just comes to life. I've had people with eating disorders explain to me that they almost feel like they get possessed by this voice. And there's just this constant cocktail party in their head of like, you shouldn't eat this is bad, you're too fat, blah, blah, blah. And imagine that just always in your brain. And so that happens for these individuals. And so when they get withdrawn, when their mood shifts, it's basically that eating disorder brain taking over, which I know is a very weird concept because you're looking at this person who you know so well, and there's someone sitting in front of you who you love and care about, and they're normal, maybe 75% of the time, but then all of a sudden they freak out. So to you, it's like, oh, well, what's going on with them? But you have to remember that's the eating disorder brain taking over. So the good news about that is we can build up the more logical side of the brain. So we have the eating disorder side of the brain, and then we have the logical side of the brain that knows that what they're doing is probably disordered, and the side that, makes them the same them 70% of the time or whatever it is. By nourishing their brain and their body better, this logical side will get stronger and stronger and stronger. Whereas undernourishing the body is going to make the eating disorder side stronger and stronger and stronger, right? So what we have to do is really work on nourishing the logical side. And what I tell people, especially if it's someone in your life that's experiencing this, is don't acknowledge the eating disorder side. Sometimes with my clients, we'll even be talking and something kind of pops up that I can tell is their eating disorder talking, and we'll address it right there. We'll say, hey, your eating disorder is talking right now. Why did that come up? And so that's something that you can do at home with a family member or friend or whoever it might be that you may see experiencing some of these things. But I thought this was interesting to point out because anorexia and restriction is very much impacting the brain more so than we think. Yes, it also impacts the body, which we talk about a lot, but I think it's important for you to understand how much it impacts the brain so that you can better help those people in your life that may be struggling with an eating disorder. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, guys. We're so glad that you're here.